Hi everyone, and welcome to day 4 of your writing inspiration. And today we are going to cover the third element when we are writing into our voice. The first one we covered on day 2, which is the body, our senses. The second we covered on day 3, which is emotion. And today we're going to look at memory. Now, memory is very tied in to our emotional architecture and into our sensual architecture. In fact, I would go so far as to say that, memory is just a kind of interesting internal landscape that consists of a whole range of emotions tied up with a whole range of sensual feelings that then get lodged in the body and somewhere in our minds or our heads or in the story of our lives. And memory is truly one of the greatest resources that we have as writers. We can mine our own memories because what is so interesting about memory is that it is not a factual account of events that have happened to us. Memory is a mixture of the things that happened to us and the way in which we have remembered the things that have happened to us. I mean, have you ever had that experience of 3 sisters in a family who all talking about the same event that happened, but everybody remembers things differently? The same thing happens when eyewitnesses, are being cross-examined in court, and they're all being asked the same questions about what they remember, and everybody sees something different. So there is something fascinating to me about memory, and what is wonderful about memory is that it gets mixed up. Memories get sort of they kind of intermarry with each other, and we remember things in a certain way, which has got a lot to do with how we feel at a particular time. So, and the other thing is that our senses, particularly for some interesting reason, our sense of smell can be a wonderful entry point into a memory. And what we, if any of you have ever read Remembrance of Things Past by Marcel Proust, he writes about the taste of these little Madeleine biscuits, which basically open up this entire memory bank of his, all these things that have happened to him, but just through the taste of this particular little biscuit, the Madeleine. And this is often referred to as a Proustian moment, this moment where we can access a whole area of our history through one of these tiny little keyholes of our senses. We see something that reminds us of. And writing is a lot about that impulse. You see something that reminds you of, or something happens, and we then have this amazing way in which history, this memory trawls behind it. We didn't even know it was trawling behind it, but suddenly there it is, that memory that happens. And of course, memory is a very important part of building character if you're building fictional characters. So one technique that I teach when people are writing fictional characters is to brainstorm a whole lot of memories for that character, a whole lot of things that have happened to that character that we might not see. So they would be underneath the eye level of Hemingway's iceberg. We may not see them initially, but as a writer, you would know about them, and you might want to foreshadow things, or you might want to use a little backstory somewhere, and that's the power of memory. The way in which we use memory is we sort of build a character through the way in which we share and tell their memories. So one beautiful little writing exercise that you can do is to do some dream writing into the prompt. I remember. I remember. So you set the clock for, say, 5 minutes, and off you go. I remember. And you just keep writing that prompt until you remember something. And when you've finished with that memory, you rewrite the prompt, I remember, and see what happens as you go through the process of remembering things that have happened to you. Because The interesting thing about memory is that it is not chronological. There are things that have happened to us way, way, way in the past that still sit so close to us emotionally, and things that might have happened to us yesterday that we have no memory of whatsoever. And if we consider the role of memory in creating identity and in creating a sense of who we are, just think of what happens to people who completely lose their memories, what happens to their sense of identity and the way they exist in the world. So memory is this incredible cachet of our of ourselves, of the selves that we remember, and it's a beautiful catalogue of the way in which that self has changed over time. So I, for example, have kept journals since I was about 16. So I have lots and lots and lots of journals. And what is so fascinating to me is going back and reading through those journals and not recognizing or remembering any of the things that mattered so much to me at the time. But what is wonderful about all these journals is I have these fabulous stories that I can now attribute to fictional characters because I actually don't remember them. And I often think of memory as this kind of part fact, part fiction, but largely emotion that exists for each of us that we can play around with. So you can access a story through a memory, and I think that whether you start with the body and then you move into the emotion and then into the memory that it elicits, um, that is one way of working into your voice. Or you can start with a memory. I remember this, but what you would then need to do is to go back into the felt sense, the body memory of what that was like. So put us back inside your skin, remember it from the body, and of course that will then start to elicit an emotion. So we can sometimes go through a memory which will then elicit either an emotion first and then back into the senses, or through the senses and then an emotion. But I do believe that one has to move through all three of those if you are writing about a memory. And if, say, you started with the senses and you were looking at something, you would look at it and look at it and be with it in your sensual state until that looking, in the words of the poet Mary Oliver, turned into a feeling. So looking at something, when we look at something, we need to look at it and look at it until an emotion arises. And as soon as an emotion arises, well, that is going to invariably be attached to some kind of memory. And so writing is about listening into these incredible nuances, these textures of who we are that play through us, through memory, through the emotions that arise from memory, and through the felt sense of our bodies that comes through reliving a memory in the writing. And those three stages, sense, emotion, memory, or memory, emotion, sense, or emotion, memory, sense, any way that you want to go through those, that is a really good start to finding your writer's voice, because those all belong to you. Those are what make you a particular and a unique writer. But there is a fourth step, and it is the most important step, I think, in the writing process, which I am going to share with you tomorrow. So tune back in, and I will be back tomorrow with another inspiring writing